It is a great pleasure of ours to have Tim and Sarah from the RenderMan and Pixar teams here to present for you guys about Onward and to also talk about all the work that goes into RenderMan and has gone into RenderMan 23, specifically around Katana. Let's turn it over to Tim and the story of Onward.
Set up working here. So, hi from California. Hopefully everyone can see this. And thanks for having me. I'm Tim Best. I was the technical lighting supervisor for Onward. Today I'll talk briefly about how Pixar lighting artists use Onward or use Katana and RenderMan to craft the imagery of Onward. To start, I'll talk about how the technical challenges of Onward differed from some past Pixar films. Then I'll talk a little bit about our lighting process. And I'll also briefly touch on some of the newer technology that we used for Onward. I hope that everybody out there, wherever you are, has had a chance to see the film. If not, it's now available for streaming on Disney+. So I've been with Pixar for just under 20 years. It'll be 20 years in September, and I've worked on a bunch of films, and both as a lighting artist and then more recently as a technical lead and supervisor. These films have often had a single standout technical challenge, which is exemplified by two other projects that I helped to supervise the lighting for, Coco and The Good Dinosaur. The Good Dinosaur, now available on Disney+. So on The Good Dinosaur, we had this giant world of naturalistic vegetation, which meant lots and lots of heavy detailed geometry. So then here, the big core problem was primarily one of complexity management, dealing with the film's vegetation and sets. We had to make sure that lighters had controls to see the detail that they needed to address notes and light their shots, but also to ensure that interactive workflows remained efficient. Then there was Coco, also available to stream on Disney+. On Coco, we had to realize Lee Unkrich and Adrian Molina's vision for the world of the dead, which meant, among other challenges, managing not only dense, detailed sets, but a sheer quantity of lights that was an order of magnitude greater than we'd ever dealt with before. Guess how many lights? I'll pause here to give you a moment to consider your answer. Time's up. Were you right? Were you correct? Are you skeptical or incredulous? To anyone out there who is skeptical about that number, know that I respect your skepticism deeply and truly, for reals. And so I included this extra slide, which is a desktop capture of me examining a point cloud representation of the light sources in a Coco shot. Unlike The Good Dinosaur and Coco, Onward had no one single standout, crack this problem and all the other stuff will fall into place type challenge. Instead, it just had lots and lots of challenges. Individually, they seemed manageable. However, tackling them all simultaneously with a short calendar while maintaining a high quality bar and not blowing up the budget was an intimidating prospect. The technical challenges of Onward break down that way, in part because it's a road or traveling movie with a lot of stuff. A lot of locations, a lot of characters, and also a lot of magic effects. Additionally, the film's lighting changes as the story moves from the familiar to the fantastic. What starts as a quotidian, less than happy teenage birthday quickly turns into an epic adventure. And as that happens, the film's images become more dynamic too. There's more saturated color and contrast. If we zoom out and look at the film as a whole, we can see that change and also notice how themes of familiarity and fantasy and Ian's emotional arc, Ian being the main character, are supported with color. This is a tableau from the first frame of every shot in the film. We first meet Ian and Barley at home on a typical morning. Well, it's typical aside from it being Ian's birthday. These are lighting studies, paintings done in Photoshop by Sharon Callahan, Onward's director of photography and lighting. She was my boss. These are examples of reference provided to lighting artists. The lighting artists used these paintings along with other reference material to craft the lighting for individual shots like this one. Dan Scanlon, Onward's director, really wanted comedic moments like this one to read clearly. So this sequence was lit with a bright, warm morning light and open shadows. That way, we all really appreciate the scene of a centaur moving through this small, cluttered suburban kitchen, truly a juxtaposition of the fantastic and mundane. Onward was lit with Katana, rendered with RenderMan, and composited with Nuke. Our lighters work with a physically based lighting model and many tools that are analogous to those that a gaffer and cinematographer might use on a live-action movie set. However, the look of Onward isn't strictly photorealistic. It's believable, but the lighting is often softer and more painterly than photographic. Achieving this sort of look can actually be more challenging to the lighting artists than photorealism. Each shot must potentially be carefully handcrafted. I'll try to show you what I mean. Here's an example of a shot from Onward. This is when Ian and Barley have pulled off the highway at night on their journey and are having a falling out and sort of an argument at a rest stop. If we back the camera up just a little bit and make the light sources visible to the camera, we can see how the lighting artist has staged the lighting for this shot, supplementing the practical lights with extra lights set up for this specific camera angle. This looks very similar to what you might see on a live-action movie set. Here's another example. This is when Ian and Barley run into, and afoul of, a gang of motorcycle riding sprites at a gas station. So here's the same trick. If we back the camera up a bit and make the light sources visible, in this shot, we'll see that it's more clear that we're cheating physics. That is, doing things that one can't do in live action. For example, most of the supplemental lights are exclusively linked on or off of specific objects. This reflects, no pun intended, a pretty good description of our lighting philosophy in general. We start with a physically based model, then we cheat. The biggest technology change for lighting on Onward was to switch to RenderMan version 22. We've had live rendering with RenderMan and Katana at the studio since Finding Dory. However, with R22, it was faster, more stable, and supported workflows that had previously required starting a new live render, like changing light linking. And that's super important on a show with a painterly look, where there's a lot of art-directed versus physically motivated, shot-specific lighting work. It was also hugely impactful in that this speed-up affected everything across the show. It wasn't a win that was limited to one location or effect or character. Again, Onward had no single big boss problem, just lots and lots of stuff. And by the way, this playback is sped up. I can't really work this fast. This was an early test, a desktop recording running an R22 live render through some workflow tasks. Onward obviously had lots of magic effects, with each spell having its own unique look. A new technology that we used for the film was a new volumetric mesh light for magic effects like the beam from Ian's wizard staff. We could use the effects assets as light sources directly without needing any kind of additional extra proxy representation of volume-based effects in the asset, like a meshed version or point cloud to use for interactive lighting. Here's an early test image with a scene lit only by the volume effect. In our tests, the volume light provided a lot of nice, sharp color detail in fog render passes. It just wasn't there when we used other kinds of proxies. And it was fast, too. In our tests, renders with the volume light ran faster than renders using a geometric mesh light, or based on a surface. This is probably in part because representing the complex, irregular shape of the volumetric beam effects as a surface can end up creating a lot of heavy geometry, a really dense mesh. Interactive lighting could be tweaked by dropping a material override node into the graph to tune the volume shader, or by using any of our available light filters, like barns or rods on the light. And all of these workflows worked with R22 live rendering. Here's the final shot from the film. However, even with that fine level of control, lighting artists would supplement the volume lights with other lights to hit specific DP or director notes. Again, we start with physically correct, and then we cheat. This is a breakdown of render layers in this shot. For Onward, we also reworked parts of the practical lighting system used for Coco to accommodate crowds of cars with complex detailed lighting rigs. We used a piece of software called Bakelite, which was originally written for Cars 3 by Tim Babb. With our updates for Onward, lighters could control the distribution of car headlight colors or change the colors without having to request upstream asset changes or de-instancing crowd models. Instancing is one of the methods used to keep complex scenes like this one as lightweight as possible. And in Katana, large groups of lights can be represented by a single fully editable master. Our term for this is a light array. Our procedural light generation code ran during our nightly shot conversion or pose caching process. It walked a USD scene and generated lightweight data that our Katana side lighting tools could consume. For Onward, this provided us with some powerful hooks for complexity management. Just like with the Good Dinosaur and Coco, our goal was to present the lighting artists with intuitive access to the controls that they need, but not such a huge set of controls that they would get lost or be overwhelmed. This shot uses all three of those technologies. Light arrays of the new volumetric mesh lights for the light cast into the scene from the volumetric fire effects, and obviously RenderMan 22. The fire effects in this sequence were designed to be modular so that they could be dressed or moved around per shot to hit specific compositional notes in the storyboards. This approach, combined with our light array workflow, also streamlined the setup work. The interactive lighting rigs for the effects assets could be built right into the assets with minimal weight and overhead, but still present the lighting artists with an optimal set of controls. Also, rather than trying to describe what's happening in this shot, since objectively there's a lot going on, I'll just remind you that you can find out for yourself by streaming Onward, now available on Disney+. So, despite myriad challenges, artists were able to craft a unique, memorable, poignant, and beautiful film. Technically, the lighting department operated efficiently, and all in all, in lighting, things went pretty smoothly, which isn't to say it wasn't shot. I want to quickly, specifically thank Jonathan Pitko and Jordan Rempel, who were also lighting supervisors on the film and who contributed material to this presentation. Thank you to everyone for tuning in, and stay safe. And with that, I think I can turn it over to Sarah.
So here I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So I'm a developer for RenderMan for Katana, and I've been working on that for about 5 years now. So I'm going to give a brief overview of RenderMan and some demos of RenderMan for Katana in action. So for some context, RenderMan is used at Pixar as the in-house renderer, but it's also used on many more films than just Pixar's. Of course, RenderMan helped to define early visual effects on some of these memorable films. The original creators of RenderMan, Ed Catmull, Lauren Carpenter, and Rob Cook, even were honored with an Academy Award for their work. And here's some more of the more recent movies that have used RenderMan. Onward was the first Pixar movie to use RenderMan 22. What that meant was a lot of big changes and improvements. We added a lot of features to improve performance, to make RenderMan faster and more memory efficient. So some highlights that are just from RFK, RenderMan for Katana. We added support for multi-threaded traversal, which leads to faster time to first pixel and faster iterations. Hydra viewer support, so those lights that you see around in the viewer, they are the same ones. Light arrays that you saw Tim talk about, a great way to instance lights. A camera settings node, so everything that used to be a global setting is, there's a lot of those now that are just, you can set them on the camera. And then of course we added the preset browser, which was previously just in our RenderMan for Maya plugin, but now it's available in all of our bridge products, so that way you can share assets, share shading networks between all your different bridge plugins. Since then, we've kept working. We're not done yet, and we've added a lot of new features. Most importantly, we're continuing to improve interactivity by supporting interactive displacement and volumes, and also expanding our bridge plugins. So we added new Hydra delegate, a plugin for Mari, and a plugin for Houdini. So before I go further, I'm going to give you a quick demo of RenderMan for Katana in action. So this is a scene. We've got Duke Kaboom from Toy Story 4. He's Canada's greatest stuntman. He's going to try to jump through that hoop and fail spectacularly. But we're going to do a live render here, and hopefully it won't fail spectacularly either. So here we're rendering it with the monitor layer in the viewer, so that way we can get quick feedback. And I'll talk about what it takes to render. So everything here is coming in from USD. We've got the geometry and the shading all coming in with USD from another part of our pipeline. And what we're going to do in Katana is make it look good. So the first step of that is the integrator. We use Pixar path tracer as the basics. You can set your light samples here, but we also ship some other ones. This is Pixar occlusion, which gives you a quick occlusion pass. And then we have other ones like Pixar visualizer. That is basically just a GL sort of look, wireframe look, but pretty great. But we're going to go back to Pixar path tracer, which is the main one that you're going to use for your full lighting scenes. The PRMan global statements node is where you'll set options that are going to apply to the whole scene, and things like your multi-threaded traversal threads, stuff like that. PRMan camera settings is where we can do things like try to mimic a physical camera lens, but in CG. So here's the field of view. We can change it and make it really, really narrow, so that way it looks more like a toy, and adjust our focal length, so that way those spots in the background are nicely blurred. PXR camera has lots of options to mimic a physical camera. Things like tilt shift, lens distortion, and chromatic aberration, which is a favorite of mine because it makes some really funky pictures with lots of colors. But we're going to turn that off and do what Katana is known for, which is lighting. And so your lights are going to be created in Gaffer 3. The Gaffer, we've got 4 different lights: dome light with an HDRI, and 3 rect lights. So we're going to switch to the perspective mode, and it's really great because you can keep your GL and your monitor layer even if you switch cameras. We ship with different lights, and you can, in the Gaffer, you can mute a light to see what the contribution is to the scene without that light, or you can solo it to see what it looks like just with the dome light on, for example. The material tab in the Gaffer has lots of, you can see all of the settings like intensity or color temperature. So if we change that, we can get a warmer or a cooler tone. And then we can see about adding other lights. RenderMan ships with a bunch of light plugins, but everything in RenderMan is a plugin, so you can create your own or use the ones that we ship. things like mesh lights, portal lights, all those things. But this scene already has lights, so what I'm going to do is add a light filter, which is something that will adjust the look of the lights without changing the light parameters directly. So this is a ramp light filter to go with the ramp that Duke Kaboom has. We're going to share that with all of the lights in the scene by just selecting all of them. And then you'll see that there's a light filter reference for each light in the scene. The ramp has a couple different modes, different types, but I want to affect the hoop that's in the scene. So I'm going to switch it to radial, which will give us like a circle shape. The ramp light filter has a float ramp that affects like the intensity from, you can fade from a light to a dark, or there's a color ramp, which will change the colors from one to the other. But for this scene, I just want to do color because it's more exciting. So we're going to just set the intensity all to 1 on the float ramp and change the color on the color ramp to something easily visible, like I'm going to make it blue in this case, since the scene is mostly reds. So as you can see, there's everything inside of that little circle there is white, and on the outside everything is blue. And now I want to place it in the middle of that hoop, and luckily Katana 3.6 provides a really easy way to do that with the new snapping tools. So I'm just going to select it on the object center, select the object that I want, and it brings it right there in the middle, which is really handy. Because now I just have to do a couple tiny adjustments and rotate it into place, and then it'll be where I want it to. Now to adjust the looks, so that way I've got the center. We offer manipulators for our different lights and light filters. So this one controls the end and the beginning, so the inside and the outside of the ramp, basically. So I'm going to move that, move it somewhere where I can see what's happening a little bit better. And then I'm going to adjust that so the inside edge of the ramp is on the inside edge of the hoop, and the outside edge of the ramp is on the outside edge of the hoop. And then with that, I can just fine tune the fall off of the ramp a little bit, and you'll see that shows up in the geo manipulator. But we can just look at that and turn off. We'll go back to our main render cam to see what it looks like in context. And we can all switch that live when it works, and that's just great and fun to see. So if we turn off all our lights and take a look, yeah, it's pretty great, but as you can see, the whole scene is blue, and that might not be what I want. So say I just want the that hoop there to be this fall off from white to blue. So luckily, there's a linking tab, and just like light linking works, we also support that same concept on light filters. So we can just select the hoop objects right there directly and add those. And now the light filter is off of everything else and only affects that hoop. So it's working great. And just muting works on light filters just like it does on lights. So we can toggle and see what we've got. Pretty happy with that. Looks great. But the one thing I didn't show you yet is materials, because all of these came in directly from Katana or from USB. But we come with a preset browser that I talked about. You can either add light rigs or you can add materials. We ship with a bunch, but you can also create your own and save them. But in this case, I'm going to take a look and make it like a wooden launcher. So all I have to do is select those objects that I want to make a certain material and turn them wooden right there by just selecting them and putting that in my scene. So yeah, there we go. We've got a nice wooden launcher, and you can see Duke happily running off of his cool new wooden launcher. So So that's basically the features for RenderMan for Katana. Just a basic overview, but since then we've added even more features with RenderMan 23. So I'm going to briefly cover the exciting new things, the Beyond section of the Onward and Beyond talk. So we've just released RenderMan 23.3 today, so you can go download that and check it out after this presentation. With it, we've got improved USD support, so we put a lot of effort into our Hydra Render Delegate to support USD workflows. That's an area that's constantly changing and evolving as USD adds new features, so stay tuned on that for future releases. And we've continued to work on live render improvements for more interactivity. Specifically in RenderMan 23, it was around displays and resolution changes. So we have some examples of that. Interactive LPEs, you can just change your source for your LPE and it will update in the live render. So in this case, we can change our color channel from being diffuse to specular to the main color channel. And you can do all of that without having to even add a new display. But if you wanted to add a new display, we support that now too. So we've got all of these outputs that aren't in the scene, but if we wanted them to be, we can just add them and they'll show up in the scene. And if for some reason that then causes like your scene to slow down, there's too much memory usage, you can just turn them back off and you'll just be rendering with one display, and that's all live. The next things we saw a little bit of this in the other demo, but normally when you're interacting and scrubbing the timeline, RenderMan will just update it'll start restart the buckets and you'll see that circle of buckets appear. But that might not be the most interactive, so we added this control called Distiller, and you'll see that it kind of progressively adds pixels from laying them over the next image. So it's kind of a dissolving effect, which can be really helpful for seeing where the final image is going to land before it's there. And finally, with this, we got interactive resolution. So this is an HD render, which is great for looking at details, but maybe not as great for scrubbing the timeline. So if you just want to see, like, what does it look like with the lighting with the animation, but I don't care quite as much about the resolution, you can change the resolution live, just like that, and get a faster playback. We also added to RenderMan for Katana a new debugging notes. So this one is for PRMan Signal Visualizer, it's called. You can check out the different signals. You can isolate like the texture. You just have to select the object, any object in your scene, and you can see what does this texture look like, and then what do those two textures look like when they're blended together. And it gives you quick feedback and a great way to debug different shading material networks. And of course, there's more than I can possibly talk about in just this demo. So if you want to learn more, we've got a non-commercial RenderMan. It's free. It comes with all the bridge products, so you can use it, try it in all the parts of your pipeline before you bring it into Katana. And then once you do that, you can give our Ship Shape Art Challenge a try. Best way to learn is to do. So we've got challenges, regular challenges, but this is our current one. It ends June 23rd, so if you're bored in quarantine, wherever you are, you can give it a try. And check back regularly if you don't have time right now, because there's more challenges all the time. So with that, I just want to say thanks.